This oration is held in the honor of our patron, Dr. JB Perirs. Ladies and gentlemen, our gathering tonight is enriched by the presence and expertise of our orator, Dr. Noeline W, who will be delivering the Dr. JB Perirs oration this evening. To officially introduce our distinguished orator to you, I'd like to welcome back our president, Dr. Noeline W.
I'll go to the camera. Okay.
JB Perirs orator tonight, Dr. Noeline W. Prins, BSc Engineering, Lanka, MA Intercultural Studies, Sri Lanka, PhD, USA. Dr. Prins received the primary and secondary education at CNS Ladies College, Colombo. She graduated with BSc Engineering honors in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Lanka. She also has an MA in Intercultural Studies from the Colombo Theological Seminary and a PhD in Biomedical Engineering from the University of Miami, USA. At the University of Miami, she was the postdoctoral researcher that conducted a clinical trial in invasive brain-machine interfaces on a quadriplegic patient. Before that, at the Faculty of Medicine, University of Geneva, Switzerland, as a scientist, she researched on the comparison of invasive deep brain stimulation and non-invasive neurophysiology in psychological disorders such as Tourette syndrome, obsessive-compulsive disorders, and Parkinson's disease. Her PhD work researched feedback mechanisms for reinforcement learning-based algorithms to improve predictions for BMI using non-human primates. Currently, she is a senior lecturer with the Department of Electrical and Information Engineering, Faculty of Engineering, University of Louvain, teaching biomedical engineering, machine learning, analog electronics, and digital electronics. Her previous teaching experience includes signals and systems, biomedical signal analysis, advanced topics in neuroscience, anatomy and physiology of central nervous system, the limbic system, neural engineering, fundamentals of computational neuroscience, and biomedical equipment technology. She is member of 3 ethical review committees: Institute of Engineers, Sri Lanka, IESL, University of Louvain and Faculty of Engineering at University of Louvain. She is a monthly contributor for the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, IEEE, Neuroethics Working Group. She is a principal investigator of an ongoing clinical trial at Teaching Hospital Karate titled Computer Assisted Rehabilitation and Improving Hand Function in Patients with Stroke.
Well, thank you very much to Dr. Noeline for officially introducing to the audience our illustrious orator this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, before the commencement of the oration, we will now be witnessing the awarding of the Orator's Medal to Dr. Noeline W. May I invite our President, Dr. Noeline W, to now do the honors of presenting the Orator's Medal and certificate to Dr. Noeline W. We have both Dr. Noeline W as well as our orator, Dr. Noeline W, joining us right here in front. And we have the Orator's Medal and certificate being brought forward as well. Ladies and gentlemen, let's recognize Dr. Noeline W as our orator here at the JB Perirs oration. And here we have the medal being officially presented. And then, of course, a certificate to go along with it, officially recognizing Dr. Noeline W as our orator here for the inauguration ceremony of the Annual Congress 2022. Please put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, it's now time for us to hear from our orator this evening. To now enlighten us on this topic, Monkeys playing video games lead to a paralyzed man walking. Please welcome our orator, Dr. Noeline Prins. Let's put our hands together, ladies and gentlemen.
Cousin podium.
Thank you. It's great to be among the greatest minds in Sri Lanka, not because you're the greatest minds, but also because these are the people that work on the nervous system that gives rise to these great minds. Dr. JB Perirs, patron of the Association of Sri Lankan Neurologists. Chief guest, Professor Wolfgang Rizal, World Federation of Neurology. Guest of honor, Major General Dr. Sanjeev Mulsingha, Secretary to the Ministry of Health. Dr. Gavani Patilana, President, ASN. Dr. Saraji Vijayasekara, Dr. Manjula Caldera, Joint Secretaries of ASN. Council and members of ASN. Joining us online, Senior Professor Sujiva Amrasena, Vice Chancellor, University of Rohana. Dr. Chitra Rangavatta, Dean, Faculty of Engineering, University of Rohana. Professor Ajit Dialvis, Dean, Faculty of Graduate Studies, University of Molecular. Neurologists, engineers, and distinguished guests in the audience. Welcome. I thank the President and Council of ASN for selecting introducing a key person today. He's a proud product of Royal College, Colombo, where he excelled both in academics and cricket. He qualified MBBS from the University of Ceylon in '63 with honors in all examinations and distinctions in pathology and bacteriology. He obtained the MD of the University of Ceylon in 1967. He trained at the Institute of Neurology, Queen's, London, as a Nuffield Research Fellow working with the likes of Sir Roger Bannister and Dr. Ross Russell. This person is none other than Deshamanya Vidyajyoti, Dr. JB Perirs. Dr. Perirs was appointed consultant neurologist at the National Hospital of Sri Lanka in '72 and served as Sri Lanka's only neurologist for over a decade at the then General Hospital, Colombo, at the age of 33. During that period, he pioneered the expansion of the discipline of neurology in Sri Lanka. He has more than 50 publications, including the description of 3 new disease entities and 3 original articles of innovations in therapy. He has authored 2 books. He has been invited guest lecturer at the Institute of Neurology, Queen's, London, Johns Hopkins University, USA, UCLA, USA, and Shiba University, Japan. One of his legacies and the most notable achievement is the Institute of Neurology building at the NHSL that was built under his leadership from '82 to '84, entirely from public donations. The all-inclusive 4-story Institute of Neurology that you see in the picture has been an unparalleled unique achievement, providing a home for neurology in Sri Lanka and encouraging postgraduates to opt for neurology as a specialty. Today, there are over 50 board-certified neurologists serving in many parts of our country. Dr. JB Perirs is a senior fellow of all 3 colleges, Royal Colleges of the United Kingdom, and is also an honorary fellow of the Royal Australasian College of Physicians and an honorary foreign fellow of the Association of British Neurologists. He was the chairman of Sri Jawaharlal General Hospital from '94 to '97 and the director of the Postgraduate Institute of Medicine, University of Colombo, from '96 to 2002. People still talk of how methodical he was and fondly remember how he would carry 2 briefcases, one for the hospital work and one for PGIM work. His administrative style was that he employed the best for the next level of leadership and trusted them with autonomy without interfering with their day-to-day work. He would lay out policies that aided in the smooth working of the hospital. In '96, with the aid of a Japanese grant, he pioneered a 900 million National School of Nursing, which was a model school at the time. The 6-story building for cardiology and cardiothoracics was also his brainchild. He was at the forefront of promoting IT literacy among medical doctors. He encouraged this by getting internet to the hospital library and making medical journals more accessible to the staff. He has been the patron of the Association of Sri Lankan Neurologists and the patron of the National Stroke Association of Sri Lanka from their inception. He is the past president of the Sri Lanka Medical Association, the Ceylon College of Physicians, the Rotary Club of Colombo West, and the Sri Lanka United Kingdom Society. His contribution to the health services of the country was honored with the title Deshamanya, and his contribution to the neurosciences and teaching was rewarded with the honor of Vidya Jyoti and Vishwa Prasadini by the government of Sri Lanka, a very rare combination of honors for a medic. Being the senior-most neurophysician, everyone respects him. He's not just a teacher of neurology, but a man who is loved and honored for standing up for what is right. Even though he achieved great heights, his integrity is impeccable, and he works with purpose and vision wherever he has led. It is said that at the time of his retirement, all neurologists in Sri Lanka were directly or indirectly his trainees. He is Sri Lanka's most senior neurologist. As one of the first persons interested in neurophysiology in Sri Lanka, it is an honor, sir, to present this oration as a small tribute to the great work that you have done. Imagine the rise of the planet of the apes. Imagine having a pet monkey who can execute commands that you just think about. Now imagine Professor X being able to walk again. What are the commonalities that you see in these? First, it's just a movie warning us scientists of the day our experiments go wrong and monkeys will take over the world. Second is just fantasy. Science hasn't developed to the point where we can communicate brain to brain. And well, the final one, medical technology hasn't developed to the point where you can fuse the spinal cord to help a paralytic walk again. So you can dismiss all of this as science fiction. I began my biomedical engineering career by teaching monkeys to play video games, mind-controlled video games. And in a few years, with what I learned, we were able to translate this to help a paralyzed man take the first few steps he had in years since his injury. This is my story. The commands from the brain to our muscles are delivered through the spinal cord in healthy subjects. However, in spinal cord injury, this connection is broken, and what we do is we get the signal into a computer and then feed it back to the muscles to continue the work, the intention that the brain intended to do, moving the muscles. This research falls under a broad category called brain-machine interfaces, BMI, or brain-computer interfaces, BCI, or in layman's terms, thought-controlled robots. At the onset of this, we have the neural data acquisition. This could be EEG signals from the scalp. It could be EPOG signals from the surface of the brain, or you can even go a few millimeters into the brain to get local field potentials or sprites. We collect this data and pass it to the next block called the signal processing block. This is the hub of the brain-machine interface. Here, first, we collect the data and clean it up. We get rid of the noise, we filter out the unwanted signals, and next, we pass it to the feature extraction block. What happens here is it identifies key markers in the neural signal that is responsible for movement. For example, the frequencies in different bands or the power in different bands, alpha, beta, gamma. The third block here is the algorithm or the decoder. This is where all the magic happens. These algorithms are very similar to the algorithms that you get on your phones, search engines, social media, photo tagging, and likewise. What happens here is it tries to map the input neural signal to the output command that the person wants to do. So think of this as a set of equations that it's trying to map the input to the output. And we all know there are redundancies in the brain. So it's not a one-to-one mapping, and you have a series of equations trying to figure out the best output possible given the neural signal. Once the output action is given, we send that to the next step, which is the actuator. This can be a robot, a joystick that you play games with, can be a computer cursor, or even a person's own limbs using functional electrical stimulation. Finally, the loop is closed through the feedback given to the subject. Now, this research is nothing new. This started in the last century, and already by the end of 1990s, we were doing human clinical trials. So here is one of the trials that was done by a group called BrainGate, which came out in the early 2000s. Here, what you see sticking out of this person's head is a neural data acquisition. There's a set of wires that are implanted inside the brain that collects the data and sends it to the computer that's behind her. And you have an engineer sitting there. And the computer has the algorithm which interprets the data and sends it to the robot, which moves as the person intended. To get the person or to get the robot to do what the person intended. So this was the first time she had moved anything of her own volition in years since her ALS injury. The neural data acquisition happens through a set of tiny wires that we call electrodes that are slightly bigger, in this case, than my thumbnail. If you notice, even the research that came out last year, you still see there are two pedestals sticking out of the head, reminding you of Frankenstein's monster. So this is one of the things that we wanted to address. We did not want things sticking out of the skull. We wanted the system to be completely internalized. Second challenge that we were going to address is, in order to train these algorithms, in your phones, on your computers, they use tens of thousands of data. We don't have the luxury of such big data in biomedical engineering in this application. Usually, the patient comes in and we teach the algorithm what the patient wants for about half an hour to 2 hours every day. This is very tedious. So the second challenge, as I said, we wanted to come up with a system that didn't need so much of data to train. So we all know perception, action, reward cycle in the brain. Reinforcement learning. You have the biological reinforcement learning in the brain. Electrical engineers have modeled this and come up with an algorithm for reinforcement learning. In this, we would be able to get two signals from the brain to make the system work. Most of these are error-driven, which means you have to tell the system what is right and wrong. The reinforcement learning is reward-driven, which means if you get a reliable reward signal from the brain, we do not need to interfere externally to tell the algorithm what is right or wrong. And here we ran into our next challenge. all the animal models, especially the primate models, were large primate. This is macaques, and in order to hit the reward centers in the brain, the nucleus accumbens in the striatum in the basal ganglia, we needed to go several centimeters in. Being a risky surgery, we wanted to try it with a different animal model, ideally a smaller primate. Our model was the common marmoset. The brains are 6 strands, and the monkey itself is less than a foot in height. So when we started working brain-machine interfaces in these animals, there was no research about how to train them to do thought-controlled robots. So starting with, what kind of treats do we give them? The size of the treats. How do we catch these animals? Typically, they are caught in nets. But again, if you have something sticking out of the skull, that's going to get damaged when you catch them in nets. So we had to design equipment that could safely catch the monkey without damaging the electronics. How do you make them sit? What kind of equipment? What shaft? The training paradigm, the surgical paradigm, all of this we had to research and establish. Prior to doing the surgery to get the data from their nervous system, we would train them to do different tasks. And these were often designed as video games. Not just children, animals also like video games. So we would give them different lights that they needed to touch, and the robot would move and give them rewards. Sometimes we would have a screen in front of them where they would do something similar to whack-a-mole. Something would come up, they need to touch it, to get a reward. Here's one such trial that we did. Other one. When the light comes up, the animal has been trained to do certain things, and the robot would mimic what the animal is doing. So prior to surgery, this would be hand controlled. Post-surgery, all of this would be brain controlled. So moving on to the surgical procedure, as mentioned, we wanted to get the signal from the nucleus accumbens in the striatum for the reward signal, and for the actual movement, we targeted the primary motor cortex of the animal. And as you see here, within 8 millimeters in this animal, we're able to get to the striatum, which was a huge advantage of using this animal model. What you see on the top right are the 2 electrode sets. So these electrodes, they're tiny wires about 50 microns in diameter, which is slightly bigger than a human hair. So you have 16 of these wires connected together, and this is one connector that would go to the motor cortex. The second one would go to the striatum. Here you see my first solar surgery. The imprint of these electrodes are about 1.5 millimeters by 3 millimeters. So the craniotomy would be around 3 millimeters by 5 millimeters. We would have 2 such craniotomies. Implant these electrodes, cover it up with dental acrylic, suture the animal up, and this is the final result again. The animal recovers in about a week or 2, and then we bring him into the lab and plug him in to see what the signals look like. These are the neural signals from the motor cortex and the nucleus accumbens. So what the algorithm needs to do is try to make sense of these squiggly lines. Our experiments worked beautifully. We were able to get very high accuracies with very low training time. And here, we ran into our next challenge. Our monkeys are not those who sit in one place. If you notice the monkeys that come home these days, jumping around, then definitely not in one place. Our monkeys also are jumping all around, and one of them broke half of a connector. Monkey was fine, the connector was broken, and there went our experiment. But one of the postdocs had an idea. What if we just plug him in anyway? So that's what we did. We brought in the monkey, half of the electrodes were broken. You couldn't see it externally because again, these are very tiny wires that were going into the brain. that we couldn't get with get something that you have not seen before, want you to be able to learn on the fly. But you see here, you see parameters of the artificial neuron much better. You see a stellar signal, and the chaos that you see here is the output trying to map the input to the output. It's saying now the input that I have received does not match what I have learned before. So I'm going to now do relearning, and then the smoothness that you see afterwards is proof that the algorithm has learned. Another thing that we wanted to do was to be able to decouple the reward signal accuracy from the overall system accuracy. One of the discoveries in our research was that if the reward signal accuracy is not good, the whole system accuracy comes down. So we came up with a threshold enhancer where we would be able to decouple the two. So I've summarized basically 5 years of my PhD in one slide. But all of this gave us a fair amount of confidence now to move to the next step, which was the clinical trials with humans. So we started off with non-invasive clinical trials, same paradigm. We chose EEG, and we had both control subjects and SCI subjects, Asia A, C5 motor complete. If they were also sensory complete, this was an advantage to us. For the actuator, rather than using a computer screen or a joystick or a robot, we decided to use the person's hand so that they'll be able to reactivate the muscles using their own thoughts. Here we use a functional electrical stimulation system and had 2 sets of electrodes that would be able to stimulate the muscles to open and grasp. Here you see one of our participants. Keep in mind he is C5 motor complete, which means without any intervention, he is not able to have any kind of hand movement. So we tested a bunch of subjects. We compared the control subjects and the SCI subjects and found out that the accuracies did not have any significant difference, which was good. We also tried different amounts of data for the algorithm to be able to train itself, and that's the light and dark colored bars that you see. Again, there was no significant difference, which gave us a lot of confidence now to move to the next step, which was the invasive clinical trials. The first human subject that I had was a 19-year-old boy. He was from Miami itself, and he came to our clinical trial sign up and he said, I want you to do this surgery. And I said, I'm really sorry. This is an elective surgery. You need to be 22 in order to do it. He said, well, change the rules. We're like, we're really sorry. It's an elective surgery. You will need to come back in 3 years. And if at that point, your muscles have atrophied too much, you will not be able to be part of the clinical trial. So he participated in the EEG clinical trial that I showed you before. And a month before he turned 22, he gave us a call and he said, I'm turning 22. I want you to do the surgery. So that's what we did. It was our first candidate. He was C5 motor complete. He had had a motor vehicle accident. He was not wearing a seatbelt, which led him to be paralyzed from shoulder down. He had shoulder movement, slight elbow movement, but no hand function and nothing below it. He was also the ideal candidate, being young, no other complications, and he was very motivated. Our neural data acquisition was the Medtronic PC Plus test. This was an investigational device, very limited amount of devices they have made to test the deep brain stimulation to be able to do closed loop PDFs. So rather than just stimulating the brain, if you record from the brain, you will be able to save the battery. That's what they were trying to investigate with this. So we use this, we deactivated the stimulation panels, and we use this just for the neural data acquisition. It's very similar to a cardiac pacemaker that you see. The electrodes are placed subdurally, and the wires go under the skin, and the transmitter is placed under the clavicle. So the system is completely internalized. As I mentioned, this was one of our objectives. For the actuator, we use the Bionex H200 Orthosis, which is commonly used for rehab. We spoke to the company and we did some modifications so that the system would be able to communicate with our system. Here's the full brain-computer interface system. You have the subdural electrodes. The wires go under the skin, and the transmitter is implanted internally. And you have the receiver in his pocket that would communicate to the computer, and the computer would communicate wirelessly to the orthosis to be able to open and close his hand. In order to decide where we want to put the electrodes, we did an fMRI study and asked him to think about movement, and that's where we would implant the electrodes. Here's our surgical team. At the center, you see the chief of neurosurgery. To his left, you see the two engineers, and to his right, you see the two neurosurgeons. We implanted two sets of electrodes that were about the size of my finger with 4 different contacts and closed him up. He recovered uneventfully. In 2 days, he was discharged, and in about a week, he came back to the lab. Here's the very first day that he tried the system. We asked him to think about moving something. If you notice, his hands are very shaky. But as I said, he's very driven and very motivated. So just within a couple of days, he was able to get really good accuracies. Week number 9 is when our trials began. We started at 55% accuracy. By the end of that week, we were reaching 90% accuracies, which meant that the algorithm would mimic what the person wanted to do. And over the 11 weeks of the upper extremity task, he was able to maintain an accuracy slightly below 90%. What you see on top here are the spectrograms from the 2 channels that we had implanted. I mentioned before, not only kids, but monkeys also like to play video games. Well, it turns out adults also like to play video games. So he said, give me a challenge. I'm trying to concentrate so hard on opening and closing. Why don't you give me a task to do? So this is what we did. We asked him to move a cup from one side to the other side, and we scored him on concentric circles to see how well he would be able to control the opposites. So this was week 1. Again, you see that he's not able to have full control of it. This is week number 3. By week number 3, he had progressed to do very fine motor tasks. He was able to pick up a piece of checkers and move it from one side to the other side. We didn't stop there. We tried a bunch of other tasks. The tasks in the Jefferson-Taylor hand function test, page turning, lifting small objects, lifting hands, stacking checkers, feeding himself, and even writing. What you notice here on the bottom right is that not just the time improved, but also the fluidity of the writing. From week number 10 to week number 29, you cannot say that this is a boy who is C5 motor complete. So the next step is, this is great. We did the upper extremity task. We wanted to see, would we be able to get it to walk using this system? Now we had implanted the electrodes, optimizing the place, the upper extremity task. Would we be able to use this same electrodes without doing another surgery to get him to walk? That was our next task. Here we ran into another challenge. This boy hadn't stood upright in over 5 years. So we needed to teach his body to stand upright. So we put him in a tilt table, slowly moved him up, got his body used to being upright again, to getting prepared to walk again. And we put him in a harness and put him in a walker, and this is the very first day of the trial. We were able to reach very high accuracies the very first day itself. We did this lower extremity task for another 10 weeks. The variance was much higher than the upper extremity task, but he was able to control the walking just as well. Our participant was not too interested in the walking as we thought he would. The reason was that it took a lot of effort on his side to be able to walk. He needed to stay upright. His blood pressure would go down and we needed to bring him down again. A lot of setting up. And we also realized that engineering wasn't developed to the point that he would be able to go home with this. So we asked him, what do you want to do? So he said, I live in a wheelchair-friendly building. I can go up and down the elevator in my wheelchair, no problem. I can access the bathrooms, but I can't leave the building. Because the door, the main door, had a handle that you needed to hold and press down in order to open it. My heart sank. We engineers and architects, we design wheelchair-friendly buildings so you can move around. But don't think about there's a world outside. So we worked with him. Because our clinical trial was done and we didn't want to stop there. We worked with him, we moved to a mechanical hand glove rather than an FPS so that he would be able to go home with minimal risk, so that he'll be able to open the door and go outside. We had a bunch of engineering undergraduates design a backpack that held all the electronics. We designed an app, and last year we were able to send it home with us. So from my very first subject to definitely not my last. A bunch of people I want to thank, very especially our participant. There wasn't a single day that he came to the lab and said, it can't work. In other clinical trials, participants would come and say, I had a fight with my wife, I had a fight with my husband or my mom. I'm not in a mood to work, it's raining, it's a gloomy day. In the entire duration of our clinical trial, a participant did not say that he couldn't work. Our monkeys have said that they couldn't work. Which is the reason why we were able to get so far within such a short time. Our clinical staff, both the monkey staff and the human staff, I had the privilege of going seemingly between the two. My supervisors, Justin Sanchez, my PhD supervisor, Eric Perlmeyer, also a mechanical engineer, who taught me everything I know about surgeries. Abhishek Prasad, my postdoc supervisor, collaborators, students, donors, the funding agencies, so many. So this audience might be asking, I'm no longer in US. We don't even have wheelchair-friendly buildings, let alone do anything so cutting edge like this. Well, turns out that the same algorithms that we use to help this boy walk, we can use in stroke rehab. So together with Professor Patilana, teaching hospital chiropody, faculties of engineering and medicine at Colombo, we had a clinical trial to investigate the effect of BCI on stroke rehab. And we're partly funded by an ASN grant. So in a couple of years, I hope to come and present the results. So speaking of stroke, Dr. JB Perirs is also the patron of the National Stroke Association. Isaac Newton said, "If I've seen further than others, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." So you be the giant on whose shoulders all neurologists in Sri Lanka have stood upon. I wish I had the opportunity to be one of your students, for I know that your students are the best. Professor Kitsiri Patirana, 2.5 years ago, when I reached out to you to collaborate with me, the enthusiasm that you showed, I had not seen in many younger people. This crazy engineer talking about multi-surgeries and putting wires into people's brains. You responded within a couple of hours. And over the past 2 years, you've not just been a collaborator, but a wonderful mentor to me. So Dr. JB Perirs, sir, when I say that your students are the best, I'm not just offering you lip service. I know, and I have firsthand experience. So my collaborator and mentor was trained by the best neurologists this country has ever known.